Leverage, man. That leverage thing,
Mm-hmm.
it can be
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. What do you think's gonna happen?
I feel like he may lose it.
The market's unforgiving. It lambasts people that are wrong. Hi guys, my name's Thaon Simms and welcome to the Limitless Podcast. Joining us as always is your co-host, Dr. Matthew Preston. Hail up the people, and Matthew.
Hey guys, what's good?
Nice, lovely. So guys, today we'll be talking a bit about, a topic that's not really spoken about a lot, but very, very crucial conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about something that we know as leverage. I think my first interaction with leverage was through my early Forex days. So it's just so interesting to see what the actual definition is and its use cases, like, in the market locally, the market abroad, and so on.
Did it work out for you when you used it for foreign? Like what
I
currency were
never.
you?
It was yen and the pound. That was the pairing at the time, but I never actually used it because I never got deep into Forex. I started trading. I made a lot of money when I just started off my first trade, and then never really made much money after that. So I was like, and it required too much time, hence me switching to stocks. But yeah, leverage is a very, very powerful tool. Very, very powerful tool. So, and there, I think a lot of practical takeaways we can get from this episode. So, guys, if you really want to hear these kinds of discussions, just smack a like, hit that subscribe button. We have a huge goal, so help us to get there. And yeah, you have anything else to say, Preston?
I mean, I
Or
think
you just want to jump into it?
it's kind of topical now, I guess. You know, there are a lot of things going on, like companies that levered up, borrowed some money. The plan was to, get a return on that money. But, in life, sometimes that just doesn't work out. Sometimes, it's the nature of investments. There'll always be risk. You can't really avoid risk. Your job is to take on a risk that you think, you are okay with, that matches the reward that you think will happen. Occasionally, something can happen. It doesn't mean that you necessarily made a bad investment. It could be something that, I think that's one of the hard things with investing, because like there'll be times where you make an investment and it was a bad decision, and it's something that some of the best investors in the world would have said, no, that's a horrible decision. But there are times where you can make an investment, it's a good decision. You could even go to Buffett and say, hey Buffett, here's my thesis on this, and he'd be like, oh my gosh, I would do that too. Like, put all your money in that, and then something could happen. Or not all your money, but a substantial portion of money, and it could not work out. You could get a negative return, and it doesn't mean that it was like a wrong. You could even evaluate it with Buffett or whatever after, and he would say, no, you still made a good investment. Yes, it didn't return what you wanted, but when faced with a situation like that, again, with similar economics or similar fundamentals or whatever, you should do that too,
Yeah. I'm reading, The Psychology of Money, and there's a chapter
by
in it.
Morgan Housel or Housel.
Yeah,
You're reading it
something
now?
like that. Yeah, and there's a
Oh,
chapter in
nice,
it
nice.
on luck versus risk, and I think there's always that element of luck that you kind of need within certain investments. Some of them are pretty straightforward, but you're definitely right, and you can't be right 100% of the times.
You won't be.
So yeah, it's impossible. Yeah, that's why I say you can't. It's impossible. Like it's definitely impossible to be right 100% of the times. So you just have to be right more than you're wrong.
And the times that you're right, you like, in terms of, like, I guess, how much money you throw at it. And it's not just the amount of times, it's also like, okay, how much money do you want to place in this, or how much your portfolio and those stuff.
100%.
You could be right 90% of the time, and then the one time you throw everything at it, and then you're wrong and you're wiped out.
Yeah, very true. But let's jump into it. because this episode's really mainly about leverage, and at its core, leverage just really it's using borrowed capital
Or
to
money.
or money, to amplify potential returns, right? And unfortunately, yes, potential losses. And investing leverage just allows you to basically control a larger position than your own cash would permit. So that's the simplest definition that I could come up with leverage. So it's like you put up a fraction of your position's value, which is your equity. So let's say you have, I'm giving an example, you have $1,000, right? You have $1,000 of your own cash, but you borrow another $4,000, right, on margin. And we'll talk about margin soon. So essentially now your portfolio is $5,000 cash, right? 4,000 was borrowed and $1,000 was your own. And then, sometimes you have like ratios. The only ratio I'll talk about is the leverage ratio, which is your total position over your equity. So your total position will be $5,000 because that's how much you control, and your position, your cash that you put up was $1,000, so it's 5/1. So your leverage ratio is 5x basically. So if you can 5 times your money basically, and why people use it is, it, as I said, it can amplify your returns. So let's say you have that $5,000, right? 10% gain on the $5,000 is what? That's $50. But a 10% gain on grand would have been $10. So your position actually would be 10% of what? Sorry,
You said $5,000,
500.
500.
Very good. You're very astute, Preston. Very good, very good. Yeah. So it'd have been $500, but if it was a 10% gain on $1,000, it would just be $100. So a 10% gain on a $5,000 position becomes a 50% gain on your $1,000 equity. You get me? So it really and truly is like a multiplier. That's how I see it sometimes. Like you could.
Just like it comes
amplify.
from like you have a lever. I guess go back to like physics. And it's like, okay, there could be something that you yourself can't lift up, but if you like put it on a lever and you hedge it against it, you're able to lift up something that you couldn't lift up before. So you're amplifying the force.
Precisely. Yeah, so that's really what leverage is, and sometimes why people use it. Because you could make, if done right, you could make significant gains. And I spoke about margin a while ago. So I think the simplest form of leverage, especially in our stock market, in the Jamaican stock market, so margin is basically borrowing money against the shares that you own, against your portfolio. So you open a margin account. Is it the same account?
What do you mean?
I'm like, the margin account, is it the same as, it's just a different brokerage account, or can you margin the shares in a particular account?
Wait, I'm not sure you get. So I guess it would depend.
So let's say you have, we're talking like Mayberry, because Mayberry has probably the free advertisement, but they have good margins. And so if I have a brokerage account at Mayberry, I don't need to necessarily open a separate account just to be able to margin my shares.
No, same one.
Exactly. Perfect. So I know in some jurisdictions you have to open a specific margin account.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then there's an initial margin requirement. So you need to have a minimum amount or a certain amount to be able to borrow against that. So I'm not sure what the requirements are, but let's say you have, the same $1,000. There's only a certain amount of money that you can actually borrow against that $1,000. Right?
Because whatever company, like, they want to get their money back. So because if they allowed you to borrow 10 times the amount of money that you have, then it's like, okay, what if you put that money into something and then it goes down in value? Then how are they going to get their money back? So usually they want to lend you less than the amount of money that you have in the account. So if you have $100,000 They don't usually want to lend you 100 grand or 200 grand. They're going to lend you maybe 50 grand or 40 grand or 30 grand. And it would even depend on what the collateral or what the asset you have is. So is it, because like you can get loans against different things, like you mentioned stocks, but you could have bonds, you could have a unit trust which could own stocks, bonds, and all kind of different stuff. And usually even they'll lend you different percentages based on what it is. So there's certain things where they'll lend you more against it because it is deemed to be less risky. Doesn't mean that it technically is less risky always, but it is deemed to be less risky. Or even like another, I think a good example of like the whole leverage is people commonly use leverage with mortgages. A mortgage is leverage.
Yeah.
It's a loan.
True.
It's backed against the house, and because houses or real estate is deemed less risky, then they're willing to lend you more against it. So it's like someone can go to a place and lend you, like if you were to go to a bank and say, yo, I earn 300K a month, 300K JMD a month, lend me $40 million to buy stocks, they would say no, like they're not going to do that really, unless you have like some really top links. But if you say, yo, I want to borrow 40 million to buy a house, they'll say, yeah, sure, we can work out something. Obviously, you're going to get like a certain loan or whatever, but you know, a mortgage is an example of leverage. It's really just a loan against a house, you know. And if you can't pay them, they'll seize the house.
And it's the same with stocks. If the value, you know, falls, you know, beneath a certain minimum, you know, because you have to maintain a minimum equity. So if it falls below this, you actually can face what we call a margin call, which can force you to either, you know, deposit cash to pay back a piece of the loan, or sell your position and sell some of the assets in your portfolio, or it's sell some of the bonds, sell some of the stocks. But that's the danger of a margin call. And so yeah, I mean, you know, we've heard about this margin call thing on the market quite a bit.
You even watched it?
Yeah,
you ever watched the movie? There's a movie called Margin Call. I watched it maybe a month or two ago.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was good. It was talking about, I think it was I'm trying to remember which financial crisis it was. Like maybe it was 08 or something like that. I don't remember the name of the company. But yeah, it was interesting, like just seeing how they handled it, like how the company handled it. There was essentially like this one company that essentially kind of was leveled up. They were like, yo, we are so leveraged, and it was just like a pin could drop and then they could they could essentially collapse or go bankrupt. And they had the assets and they were like, yo, it's gonna happen. And they were like, okay, what we're gonna do, we're gonna try sell it off to other people before everyone else realizes. And he was like, yo, you can't do that. Like they would like never do business with you again. And the head guy that they had to call in, he was like, no, you're gonna do this, even though the guys didn't really want to. And they did it in like a day. They just were like forced selling stuff, and basically by the end of the day, it was almost like they were selling something for that's worth $1. It's like they're selling it on 60 cents on a dollar, 70 cents on a dollar. And as the day progressively, the day progressed, it was like they were selling it for less and less and less, and more people started hearing about it. And then, it's like almost the end of the day, he's trying to sell it for like 40 cents. And then people are like, no, screw off. Like he would call, like some of the bankers would call the people, and then they would just tell them to like, screw off. Like they wouldn't even hear them, man, because I guess word was getting out,
Yeah. It's so funny that that sub theme of like margin calls and panic. Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily funny, but there's a whole thing where, and I'm not entirely sure if it's automatic, where you can automatically liquidate, because there's a whole subsection called, I think it's a loss aversion, and there's like a
of the
lot of
book you're
math
talking
to
about.
it. No. This is still within margin calls and like panic and so on, because I think there are a couple. I don't know if it's psychologists or economics, but they actually found that people feel a $1 loss about twice as intensely as like a $1 gain, right? And so leverage pushes that pain up several fold. And so can you imagine if that happened to you and you had a bank account, and you already margin some of your portfolio, and your equity starts to drop, right? The thing is, your broker is not your model, right? At 25% equity, or if it gets too low, they can push that sell button. And so, and it's terrible, because that's often in certain days where there's like weak liquidity on the market. And can you imagine now, you sell the stocks, so the broker sells your stocks that you own, because the you get a margin call. Then that forced selling triggers the price to fall. Other people are selling too, because they're probably seeing the price fall. Panic sets in, and selling pushes the price lower, which triggers more calls, and that can just be literally a downward spiral.
Yeah.
And I think the best example of that would be COVID 2020. Right, that was like a flash market crash where many retail investors, they were just selling. And I can't imagine at that time how many people actually had margin loans on their portfolios, because even the biggest of stocks, they fell. Even the blue
Apple,
chips, the Grace Kennedy.
Microsoft. Well, you're saying just globally
I was
too.
talking locally, but even foreign as well. I'm talking like even Grace Kennedy, Seprod, Carb Cement, whichever companies people used to
NCB, all of them.
Whichever companies people used to margin, that. So it's like a fire alarm that also turns off your water the moment you need like that calm and that liquidity. Both vanish. Both of them just disappear. And so it's something to always bear in mind whenever you're thinking about margin and so on, because you have to
Just
really
any loan,
which
really.
stock are you? Pardon me?
I was saying even any form of loan.
Any form of loan.
Any form of loan, because try to think about it that, hey, like, it's one of the things is that when you lever up or you borrow money, you are putting yourself in a position where you are less likely to be able to withstand some shocks, like a black swan event, like COVID, for example. COVID won't be the last black swan event. There'll always be some sort of event that could happen. Asteroid could crash, or explosions, wars, nuclear stuff.
But I don't even think it has to be a black swan event.
It's
just
true.
It could just be a regular stock, but it's very volatile as well, right? Or it's open to a lot of public perception, or there's like high risk involved, or so on. So it's all stocks are open to public perception, but if there's a lot of either positive or mixed reviews, negative and positive sentiment about the stock, you may not necessarily want to margin that kind of stock, because if it's such a volatile stock, you could get called at any point.
Or if it is a
which
stock,
begs the question,
it can just be volatile. Any stock.
Which begs the question: what price are you margining? You're margining that stock at? Is it at market price, or can you margin way below market price?
Or it's really the value you're saying, like the value. So you have really once again the 100K. You're borrowing 50% of that money, or borrowing 10%. But it's always good, I guess, to try to, like, because when you're it comes back to the whole thing of, like, I think we spoke about it in one of the episodes, like the whole thing of like market cycles. So you mentioned that guy, Morgan, I think it's Housel or Husel. I read Psychology of Money. That's a good book. I don't know if you read Same as Ever by him too.
No, I haven't.
That's a good one too. I definitely recommend that. But he is good friends with a guy that I would recommend you also read on, Howard Marks. Like, they have like I think they work in like a fund and stuff. And Howard Marks talks a big part about like the whole psychology of like the markets, and a big part of that is related to like interest rates or debt cycles, because he says essentially what usually happens is that you'll have a period where money is cheap, or you can easily get money from people. Interest rates are low. You can just get money quickly. And the reason that usually that happens is that, things have been kind of going really well for a while. So people have been getting investment returns. Everybody's saying, hey, the world is doing good. There's a lot more, I guess, general positive sentiment. And so people are more likely, businesses are more likely to lend you money. People are more likely to start businesses, more likely to buy up assets. And you go through that period, and that period can be variable. It could be a few weeks, it could be months, it could be years. Usually it's maybe like years or so. And then there'll be something that happens that kind of affects that. So, you start to go through some economic hardship, could be a black swan event or whatever. And then it's almost like, okay, the returns start to decrease, businesses start to get affected. And the people who were borrowing up the money when things were good, they can now get into pressure because they levered up. They were like, hey, yo, things are going to go good. Like, it's almost like you kind of forget that, hey, there are times when things go bad. Like, it's not going to be good forever. And so the sentiment that was around that time when things were good, you borrow the money up, but then now when things are bad, how are you going to service that debt? How are you going to pay that loan? And then bam, people get forced into margin calls, selling assets, crashing stock prices or asset prices or dropping. And then you'll go into a period where people don't want to lend money because, damn, I don't want to. Do you remember how we just lost money? I don't want to lend money. You have to be they're more scrutinous or apply more scrutiny when you're like lending out a loan. So it's like you're going to look at all kind of different things and you'll be like, okay, should we lend these people the money? Like, why? And they go fill out a bag of documents. It wasn't anything like it was just maybe a few years ago. A few years ago, anybody could have get a loan. A few years now, they're like, hey, what's your balance sheet? Or they're gonna. There's a lot more scrutiny that goes into it, and then that period will last, a few months, few years, or whatever. And then it's just a cycle that will repeat over and over and over. And a big thing is that because there's a lot of times there's a lot of time in between that, you'll have people going into the market where they don't even really know about when things are bad. So it's like if they go into a market when things are good, it's like they don't even know when it was bad, and that then they may lever up. They may have good times, get good returns, think they're great, borrow money, and then bam, the bad things happen. Sell, sell, sell. So it's important, I guess, to kind of like think of that. Like when you're leveraging, like it's not that leverage itself is bad. I'd say it's just you have to know kind of okay how much to leverage, or because at the end of the day, like I don't think really a country or economy can grow without leverage. It's very hard, I'd say. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. It's yes, I agree 100%. I don't think a market can truly, uh, capitalize on all the opportunities without leverage. And I think I mean, we talked a lot of the cons, but there are quite a few pros as well. And I think the pros have to do a lot psychologically, because, and you have to be very careful with margin too, because there's certain psychological, I don't know if you've ever heard of something called the gambler's fallacy, but after like 3 wins in a row, we unconsciously think the fourth is due, and people almost always double down at that point in time. And that's yeah, it's always happens. And I think that happened to me too during when I just started investing, because it was IPO after IPO after IPO, and all of them were bangers. And someone said, all right, QWI IPO, yes man, this is it, this one going to make me rich. Oh gosh, we all know how that turned out. Yeah, it took me,
what was the IPO price at again?
I think it was $1.25 for JamT shareholders, which I was, and
that was
$1.35.
2019.
Yeah, $1.35 for general public,
and it's now
it's trading
71 cents.
I'm glad I got out when I got out, because I got out. I doubled down when it traded like at 80 odd cents, 90 odd cents, and sold at $1. So it took a long time. It took I think I was in internship at that point in time, and I invested in final year, so it was at least a year. I was holding on to QWI. At least a year. I remember I was holding on to QWI before it started moving again. But yeah, that's just another thing, because imagine if I margined for that and then the price fell, and I took my margin money and put in QWI, I'd have just bought. But there's also the dopamine jackpot as well, because any gain taps the same brain circuitry as like, you ever see those gambling or those casino lights where you see people just constantly pressing those buttons or drawing down the lever for the and it's like a reward per spin kind of vibe. Leverage simply does that. It multiplies the reward per spin. And so I remember, if you remember neuroscience, bro, from like med school, but there are certain areas in the brain that are responsible for the whole reward circuitry. I think it's nucleus accumbens, and it's like that hit. It's almost like an addiction in terms of like when you're winning and so on. It's almost like I don't know if you remember that aspect of neuroscience.
Yeah, I was
And
trying
there's
to
like an
remember
emotional aspect to it. So there's like the amygdala, and I think I'm not sure if it's the parahippocampal gyrus or somewhere in the hippocampus, but that gives you that emotional reaction to it. There's one that gives you that really feel good feeling. I think that's a nucleus accumbens. Cesar, one of the neuroman them can correct me in the comments, but yeah, I love that part of neuroscience. But yeah, man, like as there's always the allure of more that I think people should be aware of, that you're wired to be able to make those irrational emotional decisions because you feel like, if you get like a 20% bump on a 2 times margin, that's like 40% of what you could have get instead. It makes you feel good because you can make a lot more money, but you always have to med yo. Risk is still there, and no investment is risk free. Absolutely no investment is risk free. As simple as it may seem to you, anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen.
Yeah.
But I think we should talk about some actual instances of where maybe leverage has actually been used and maybe played out well. Don't know if you know any.
I think probably the easiest one would probably be Buffett.
Okay.
Buffett, one of the big ways that he has made his fortune is through managing the money of insurance companies. So insurance companies, whether it's life or general insurance, you're paying someone money up front, just in case that bad event happens, you get sick or whatever. But that the insurance companies, their goal is to take that money and invest it in prudently and get a return, and so that when some people eventually do need that payment, they can pay them back, but they can still keep some of the money, and then you can continue to grow that. So he has bought like a lot of insurance companies. I guess one of the most famous ones would be Geico.
Yeah,
everyone probably knows that ad with the gecko. Yeah, I remember I used to watch that on TV.
How did the ad go again?
He would always be.
Is it 15% or more on car insurance or something like that? I think that was the ad. I can't remember.
Yeah, like I don't. Yeah, like there'd be some random situations, and you just see the gecko, and he would say that line and something about it, like, "Oh, you could have saved that with Geico." But yeah, essentially that was what Buffett he would do that. Like the insurance people would pay the premium or the money up front. He would take some of that money and then
if I wanted a car loan, or I wanted an insurance. Let's say Geico was my car insurance for my car. I would pay you our money, for the year, because I think it's a yearly insurance fee, or you can do it. You can
twice,
split it up, or twice a year, or something like that. So let's say my insurance, for argument's sake, is 100 grand. My 100 grand would eventually end up to Mr. Buffett, and you're saying he would invest that money instead of holding on to that cash, just in case.
So you'd have to hold on to some cash. You'd have to hold on to some cash just in case something happened. But once there's usually like a minimum capital adequacy ratio to say, how much money. So it's like, say the claims you had, like say all the claims were to get paid out in a year and that were to cost $1 million. It's like they would say, you need to have a certain percentage of that money.
Of that.
So you need to have $2 million or $1 million or $1.5 million. But once he satisfied that ratio, he said, I'm going to invest the money. He'd buy up stocks, bonds, whatever investments he saw. And then, these investments would pay out. And then once it paid out more than the interest or whatever expenses, when the people call for the money, he would, you'd get a return. So that was a big form of his leverage. And he does use leverage in other times where like he'll borrow money. Like I think he was doing a play recently, maybe it's earlier this year or last year, where like there are these Japanese companies or something. I think it's some of the car companies, like maybe I don't remember the names of them, but essentially I think they were trading at really low prices. Like I think they were giving you almost like 10% dividend yield annually, and then he was able to borrow money at like really low rates, like 2% or something like that. So the dividend yield alone was giving him that return. And so he does that even if you look into some of his arbitrage plays, where it's like, okay, he likes to do them where it's not really a big gap in the price. So say, a company is trading at $1, someone announces that they're going to buy it at $2 a share, but there's a risk that the deal may not go through. The market has set it at now $1.50 or $1.80. What he'll sometimes do is buy at the $1.80 with large volumes and cheap rates, and then sell at that $2 because he thinks the deal is likely to go through. He sometimes uses leverage for that.
I think it's absolutely brilliant still having insurance as because it depends on the insurance, of course, because now you have like property insurance, which is going up because of climate change and so on, and houses being damaged when burial happened, and the umpteen amounts of hurricanes that passed through the US last year. But even when you think of something like I just want to try and simplify it a bit, because you, as we said, policyholders pay premiums to Buffett, and he would get claims that arrive maybe months or years later. Because for me, I've never claimed since I've had my car, and I've had this car from 2021, right? So it's about 4 years now. I've never claimed. So that's basically
Who's your
until
insurer?
claims. GK General Insurance. Yeah. And until claims are actually settled and so on, Berkshire Hathaway can invest that cash anywhere they want to invest it, as if it was their own cash, equities, bonds, whatever, by whatever businesses and so on. But Medzit, if the underwriting just breaks even or makes a profit, the cost of that cash, of the float, it's either it's zero, or even it can even be negative, because if you're not paying out claims, if not a lot of people are claiming, right, that's literally brilliant. So you're making a profit on that, and you're investing to make profit on that as well. So that's leverage that actually pays you to hold it. I thought that was brilliant. I literally thought that was a brilliant, and I think the
That's
acquisition,
why he did it.
yeah, the I think he acquired it in 2000, Geico, like the whole. I think it became a wholly owned subsidiary, like 2000 or something like that. Yeah, but and of course there are other well managed leverage. I think TransJam in 2020, they issued, I think, a 10-year note at like 5 point something percent. I don't remember. It was a bond, and they backed it by the toll road cash flows, like future cash flows of the toll road. And I think investors love that kind of stuff, because you have a drive on the toll, so I think that was another good use locally of like leverage. There are a ton of them too. I think Wigton, I think Sepra did a $7 billion takeover. It's just like a lot of different ways in which leverage has been used on our
There's also
local
some
market.
bad ones though. We were still talking about Buffett. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. So most people hear about like Buffett and they hear about Charlie Mungo. Have you ever heard of Rick Guerin or Guerin? Guerin? Oh yeah.
Yes.
So like a lot of people have really heard of him though, because he apparently, when Buffett and Charlie had started a partnership, there was a guy named Rick, and he was also like in that partnership with them. And they were compounding. He was really smart, doing really nice returns, but he used more leverage than Buffett and Charlie. And then in one of the like financial crises, he was on margin, borrowed up money, and then stocks crashed. He had to sell his stocks, and he had an issue essentially paying for that. Apparently, he even owned a stake a significant stake in Berkshire Hathaway, and apparently Buffett bought him out back then, and I think he bought him out for like $40 per share. And
Wow.
Berkshire Hathaway today, I want to actually check what it is trading at. Their share price today, let me see, I think it's the Class A shares, is 719,000 US.
Wow.
719,000 US. Just gonna probably approaching $1 million, and he bought it out for like, I mean, it was still years ago, and obviously like inflation and stuff, but you know, that's even with that, it would outpace inflation and stuff. And
Yeah,
people really
that's
hear
so true.
about him. Apparently, people have even asked Buffett and Charlie about him, and about the guy, and they were like saying that, hey, you know, Rick was essentially in a hurry, like, because he was saying that, yo, Buffett and Charlie essentially realized that, yo, we're gonna get rich eventually. Like, we just have to keep doing this. And even though we mentioned that leverage will increase your returns, once again, your portfolio is less likely to withstand shocks, and shocks are going to come. So it's not that Buffett and Charlie didn't use leverage; it's just they were very careful with their leverage. They were saying, yo, we don't want to leverage to a certain point, and then we mentioned like how he leveraged, like using insurance and all that stuff. And yeah, that would be I guess a bad example. I don't know how much exactly he lost and stuff. Or even Bill Ackman, if people know about him, apparently like he had done, like, through his company, I think it was Pershing Square, they had like a big bet on like this pharmaceutical company, and then you know, he had bought it with, you know, money and that stuff, or with debt, and then, you know, things didn't work out so well, and they had to walk away from that, and I think they lost probably like hundreds of millions or maybe billions on that. You had any examples that you wanted to mention, like, I guess, poor examples, or examples where the leverage didn't work out?
There are a few, you know, and I don't know, you know, there's some painful ones that I think are people still feel, because in that same book, Psychology of Money, while we're referencing it a lot, it really and truly talks about how certain generations also behave,
yeah, that's a
and
good
their
part.
attitudes towards money. Meaning, you know, if you grew up in a generation with Cash Plus and All-ins, those Ponzi schemes, you know, that leverage story, then you're going to be avert, and you've lost money, or you've heard your granny or your neighbor did lose money in an All-in, and people actually borrowed money against their house and borrowed money against whatever to you know, put money in these schemes, right? And they were told that that's investing. Then they're way more apprehensive to invest in stocks and so on, because they're going to see those things as extremely risky. Not put no money in a no bank again, money under their mattress and those kind of things. So I think, you know, there are a ton of Jamaican use cases where leverage did not go well. But I also think that now the leverage story everyone's watching is actually NCB and Guardian. I think that's really the, you know, what I even was listening to Dion Jackson Miller interview Mr. Bowen on, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday evening on Beyond the Headlines. I didn't even listen to the radio, but my friend said tune in, so I just listened. Big up Akilo. But yeah, you know, I was trying to understand, you know, the whole, where all of this came from. You know, how is it that NCB is at this point? And for those who don't really know what's going on, I'm gonna try and see if I can provide some level of context. So NCB started buying Guardian, I think it was 2016 or so on, right? They first bought an initial portion of Guardian. I think it was maybe like 30%, and then they increased their stake to after a few years to 60. It's almost 62%, right? That they own. This is NCBFG. And you know, the deal was largely debt financed. I think it was May 2019. The deal was largely debt financed, you know, at the holding company level, so NCBFG. And you know, 2020 happened. At that point in time, NCB raised a $250 million note. Right, it's like a bond. US.
They
Yeah,
borrowed
very
money.
good to. Yeah, they borrowed money. and
levered up.
yeah, they leveled up via what they call a diversified payment rights securitization. Basically, all of that means, NCB collects foreign payments from, people. They collect foreign payments, right? And, it was, so they get money from overseas, like remittances sent to Jamaicans through the bank. But, they bundled what NCB did. And this is why I say finance is a big craft. And I like it. I rate how they can create financial solutions. They basically bundle the rights to those future payments into a financial product, and investors bought that product, if that makes sense. So it's like investors are buying the hope of future cash flows from people sending money back to Jamaica. And so investors bought that product, giving NCB that 250 mil US upfront. And, over time, those future payments are to go directly to repay the investors. And I think that, rather than borrowing from like a bank or so on, they did that. It was cool at the time. I think I can't remember exactly what the percentage interest rate was on it. I don't know if it was 5 point something percent. I need to actually look back, but after that now, they're supposed to be paying back a certain amount every quarter. That's how those bonds kind of work. So you pay back a certain percentage quarterly. So they're paying, you pay down and so on. But the deal was structured in such a way where after a certain point, I think it was 3.5 years or something like that. After a few years, they had to make bigger payments. I think it was close to like US 11 mil. I don't know if that's per quarter or so on. So they had to make those payments, and they weren't necessarily paying off the principal, which is, that 250 mil. So I remember seeing some articles about it. I don't know if you can find any, but I remember at the time there were some articles, NCB not paying off those loans and so on. And at that time, 127, maybe 128 million Guardian shares were already, pledged. So they were locked up. They were used as collateral against older loans. And now they're trying to secure 300. I think they actually secured it, 300 million US, to also be backed by.
Well, I don't think they actually got the 300. They were trying to get 300.
Based on the wording of what they said, it's so difficult to understand exactly what they were saying, because last night, based on the call that I heard, it sounded like they were there, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, because this is a notice that came out July 31st at 7 p.m. So this is saying NCB announces further to its release on July 24th, successful issuance of its senior secured notes, or basically its loan. It says the notes have a interest rate of 11% and mature 2030, so 5 years at 11%. It was priced on July 24th and funded today, so they actually got the money July 31st. Final issuance size of 225 mil US. So unless there's another one. And this is official notice
that
to
came out yesterday.
to the stock exchange. Yeah. It's supposed to be listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange. Oh, interesting.
Interesting. So they got how much money, you said?
This is saying 225 mil US.
But they were looking for 300 mil.
Yeah, I think that was the initial notice.
Either way, those shares were... So when I said pledged, right? Pledging in this case, so NCB, as I said, owned those Guardian shares, but they pledged Guardian shares, meaning the shares basically sit in a trust as first priority collateral. So if the bond, I guess this is the 200, and I need to actually see more notices, because did they use all of Guardian shares because they didn't get the big 300 mil? All of this is pretty new, so we're just going off of very current information. But trustees can either sell or transfer those Guardian shares to repay bondholders if this bond ever defaults. So that's what pledging means. And because Guardian is NCB's largest non-bank asset, losing it would actually gut the group's earnings, and by extension, when you think about it, it could be dividends to shareholders and things like that. So I think that's why people are, very skeptical about what's going on. And if you look at the financials, the most recent financials, you can see the portion that comes from Guardian versus the portion that comes from like banking and so on, and it's a significant portion of money that they make from Guardian. I think it's half their revenues or close to half their revenues. I need to actually double check, but it's a significant portion. So NCB, if they ever for any, if they actually lose Guardian, it will gut them significantly. So, and I think that's why the move alarms the market a lot, because one Caribbean insurer now, you prop up almost what $500 million of NCB's obligations, and then the profits, Guardian's profits feed NCB, which provides it's so intricately related. Like, you losing Guardian would be significant and sends ripple effects throughout the entire market. And then you have to think about the people that also invest in NCB stocks, because they just had an APO at $65 recently. I think I was late last year, and people bought in at that price. Now it's trading below $30. It's been a few days now since it's been below $30. I think that's also due to maybe, I don't know, optics. People maybe not necessarily thinking they can pull off the raise. Because you have best case scenarios and worst case scenarios, right? Like, best case scenario is the bond price is smoothly, everything is good, all the proceeds have been refinanced, right? So that first bond that they had at the 250 mil, they paid it off. Those Guardian shares that they pledged at that time no longer pledged, and you get a fresh new bond, right, that matures later down the line. It's like kicking the can down the road. Like, you'll solve that problem eventually. Right, we've raised money now to sort out this debt that we have here, and kicking the can down the road isn't necessarily bad, because that leaves you with time to breathe and get more opportunities and possibly make more money and so on, to be able to pay it off. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's the best case scenario, because that temporary overhang fades. Share price could even rebound on the whole debt reduction story and all of that kind of stuff. So best case scenario, right? Other things that could possibly happen, I don't know, can have default and collateral enforcement. So trustees actually auction off Guardian stake. Leaching could lose control of the Trinidadian insurer and associated cash flows. Then, as we said, earnings drop, valuation takes a massive hit. Possibility of a new majority owner steering the bank as well. That could happen.
You saw there was a notice, recently. Let me share it. So this notice, I think this was posted yesterday too. So it's the JCSD, the Jamaica Central Securities Depository Limited. They essentially made this post, and it was saying that they are the trustee for a lot of these bonds to AIC Barbados, Portland Barbados, Specialty Coffee Investment Company, which are basically a lot of companies, controlled by or related to Michael Lee Chin. And there's all of these different bonds. So this is mentioned in 2021, 2020, all of these different bonds. You can see the screen is a lot of different bonds and a different interest rates, some at 6%, 7%, whatever. And it's like saying, okay, I think these are due, like some of these are due September 2025, some are due, is this one saying July? Oh, is this one saying July 2023? But essentially they're saying that they're going to they sent out a notice to to people that own these bonds, and because there's going to be like a meeting that they want to have about the basically related to the investment. And I think it is related to, hey, the person that, or the company that you borrowed or you lent the money to, they need more time to pay you the money. So let's try to work out some sort of deal that gives them more time,
Enough
so that you
time.
can get your money, and maybe we will change the rate at which, maybe you'll get a little more interest rate or something. So it's trying to, I think, because it said that the ballot process will conclude in less than 7 business days, but I guess there's the holidays and stuff. But so essentially, I'm reading this as by mid-August, these meetings should happen, I guess. And
Yeah.
I guess it'll be interesting to see. There'll likely be a notice around that, or maybe some articles. But yeah.
I mean, for me, the market can be unforgiving because right now, times are tough, yes. But NCB is still printing profits, still a good company, right? Don't get me wrong, still a good company. But as we always say on the podcast, the company and the stock price are not the same thing. And I think, it, as I said, the market's unforgiving, so it rewards people that are right, but it really and truly criticizes. In fact, it lambasts people that are wrong. And I think with the size of NCB, people actually, the gravitas of the situation is it's massive to a lot of people. I mean, if you look in NCB's top 10, pension funds are in it. People's pension is in it. If NCB gets taken over, people are probably wondering, what will happen to my pension, this, that. So it's a real fear for individuals, for retail shareholders as well. I would actually love if it would be a dream if Leachin actually came, Mr. Michael Leachin actually came on the podcast and spoke, because they said they would talk more about the good that they're doing, the good things that they're doing,
when did
and
they
so
say
on with the company. I said that last night on RJR. I said they don't. I think is he the CEO, Mr. Boyan?
I think he's is it the bank?
Of the bank,
might
yeah.
Be. But he said that.
Yeah, but he Bruce Bowen. Yeah, he said he would speak more about NCB, and he wants to go on different forums and speak. So hey, if Limitless is open to have you guys on for sure. If anybody knows somebody, that would be great. Leave it in the comments below, and we'll reach out and hopefully make things happen. But we want to hear those kind of things. In fact, as shareholders, we always want to hear about our investments. What are you guys doing with our money? Are things good?
Wait, shareholder? You're a shareholder?
No idea. No.
He's a shareholder.
I'm just talking general. I'm speaking for the people, man. I'm speaking for the people. No. Yeah, I mean, we can't make a video on NCB dropping to 30 a few months ago, and it actually happens, and I'm a shareholder. That wouldn't make sense. If I know it's gonna fall. But yeah, I would love to talk to them, because we have questions as well. I'd love to know what they're gonna do with some of the money. What are their future plans? Do you have any acquisitions? Those kind of stuff. Because I think shareholders want some good news at this point. Are dividends gonna be squeezed? Are the interest rates that high that all the payments are gonna be made to that new bond, and not much is left for shareholders? Right? Those are the pertinent questions that are on people's minds. What am I going to do about the stock price? If they're going to do anything about the stock price. So I think those are the pertinent questions. But yeah, hey, if it works out, Leachin is a genius, and life just continues as it normally goes. So that's why I said the market's just unforgiving, man. So yeah, but we'll see. What do you think? What do you think's gonna happen?
Boy, I don't know. I feel like he may lose it. I don't know. I still don't know exactly how much money it is that is owed, but there's so many different bonds, and if the bondholders say, hey, we don't want to wait any longer, I don't think they can continue to just keep selling the shares on the market like that. I wish I could find out exactly how much, but as I said, the value has dropped so much that I feel like he may be forced to at least I think sell more pieces, like so say like sell 10% or something like that, like 10% of the company, not 10% of his stake. Because I think he may lose control, which would be dropping below the 50%. I think he's right there. Right, the company's right around that point now, maybe like 51 or something like that. But I don't know. I feel like they're gonna lose control. I feel like they're gonna lose control. So I guess the question is really who would buy? You know, could it be like a Caribbean company or?
So my question to you, Chairman Leachin, we have a lot of investors, especially Mayberry clients, who have been investing in the NCB stock. And we're seeing where the market is not responding to the numbers. And one of the analysis that we've seen is that, you know, there are three basically major players that are still selling, and the market is like, why would they still be selling? You as the majority shareholder, you between yourself and your companies, you control in excess of 1.24 billion shares in the company. You have some other former executives that are selling as well. And the question is, if we're seeing what we're seeing here from the outside, right, why would these three key people who would know what the potential of this business is, why would they be selling? Because if they stop selling tomorrow morning, we're of the opinion it's a $90 stock. But we don't mind if you continue to sell because we can get to buy more.
That is the first bit. You know, everybody has to make their own capital allocation decision. So not because I have sold shares means that I don't have any confidence in the company. Because I've sold shares, I sell 10, 15 million, 20 million, 30 million shares. That's insignificant relative to the total holding. I'm not selling my holdings. Everybody has their own capital allocation needs, and which may not have anything to do with how well the business will do or is doing. And at the same time, if you're selling into a market that is illiquid, then you know it takes a lot longer. And but on the flip side, as you said, there's an opportunity to buy at these prices, which by any measure are just giveaway prices, basically.
So you've heard it. Michael Leachin says it's Black Friday. Giveaway prices.
But could it be even like an international company? Like imagine a US company or Canadian company or something just coming.
Like which company, I think?
I don't know. It legit. There's so many companies.
A bank could buy it?
Yeah, there might be.
Like a JP Morgan.
Yeah, I guess. Once again, it really depends. Like, because when you get in something like an investment, because the company's under pressure, it's like they're kind of forced to sell at a certain price. If they could get it for cheap, they might say, hey, like, yeah, we'd love that. It may not be like a big thing to them, like to move the needle that much, but it's like, if they're getting something that maybe in a few years they see was worth at $100 and they're getting it at $10, $15, $20, they say, we'll do that. You know, we have a lot of money to handle.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
leverage, man.
That leverage thing, it can be dangerous when used well.
I think
it can definitely.
Think about it. What happens if COVID didn't happen? Would we be in the same situation? Who knows? How would I don't know. You know, maybe.
In fact, I think there's a point where NCB, they wanted to list NCB on the New York Stock Exchange, and then COVID happened. Like I remember an article came out, and I'm like, NCB's what, $200 now. So if they list over there and you did the conversions, it'd at least be $1 per share, maybe, or so on, something like that. And I was just like, these are huge plans. Imagine NCB getting all the way over there on the New York Stock Exchange. That would be insane. But then COVID happened, and the rest is history, and we're still living in it. A lot of companies are still battling that economic downturn from COVID. It's just the bigger companies that are in these kind of positions. It's a bit tough for them to get out of the hole like that. So they have to be doing things like this, trying to shore up more capital,
Mm-hmm.
trying to pay off those loans, just trying to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
Business is tough, man. Business is tough. But yeah, man, I think that was really good. In my opinion, for some takeaways, I would at least say, just know your tolerance before adding debt, right? The leverage that pays you beats the leverage you pay for. And any bad market window, any investment can turn leverage into a margin call. So it's just to be prudent with your money. Like if you're really investing with other people money, you better be right. Yeah, you better be right. But yeah, guys, if you guys have any thoughts, leave it in your comments down below. What do you think is gonna happen to NCB? We would love to hear. We read all your comments. So we'd really love to. We probably shouldn't read all your comments, but we do. We definitely do. Some YouTubers said don't read all the comments, but hey, we want to hear what you guys think because it's very topical right now. So tell us, guys, what do you think is gonna happen to NCB? You think they're gonna make it? You think they're not? What do you think is best case, worst case scenario? How do you think things are going to play out? If you love this episode, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys know exactly when we, all these episodes drop. And if you just liked it, just leave a like or share it with a friend. We'd love that. Thank you guys so much. Hope you have a great day. Limitless out.
Peace.